Elma? Can't remember yesterday, but did I miss one of these meetings?
Here last week. You were here 2 weeks ago.
Okay. As long as you're okay with that. Right, there you go. Beat the county. Find a Wi-Fi connection here.
Good morning, folks. I'd like to call this meeting of the Tulare County Planning Commission to order for October 25th, 2017. Roll call, please.
Gong.
Here.
Millies.
Here.
Elliott.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz is absent today, and he did inform us he would be absent. Whitlatch.
Here.
Vitigliano. Here. Aguilar.
Here.
Good. Please join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. Under state law, matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon in the Planning Commission today. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments. So that all interested parties have the opportunity to speak, any person addressing the Planning Commission may be limited at the discretion of the chair. Is there anyone who wants to speak on any item that's not on the agenda for today? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, and that's the approval of minutes from our last meeting.
I'll make a motion. We approve the October 11, 2017 minutes.
Second that.
Roll call, please.
Gong.
Yes.
Millies.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Whitlatch.
Yes.
Vitigliano.
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Okay, we'll now take up item 4A, which is pretty much what the agenda consists of today. Item 4A is a public hearing that will pertain to a program Environmental Impact Report, EIR, and Planning Commission recommendations for an amendment to the Tulare County General Plan for the proposed Animal Confinement Facilities Plan. That's GPA 10-002. The Dairy and Feedlot Climate Action Plan, Dairy CAP, and Zoning Ordinance Amendment PZC 17-040 to implement the proposed ACFP and the criteria and standards for administrative action for certain compliant bovine facilities to implement the proposed ACFP. Today we have a Spanish interpreter available if there's any need for that. We encourage anyone who is speaking to speak clearly and pause regularly during the presentation and comments so that the interpreter can keep up with you. The public hearing is now open on this matter, and we would like to welcome those members of the public that are here to speak. At this time, there's a few sort of logistical items we need to go over as a part of the process. Because this is a public hearing to amend the general plan, all of the above items will be heard under one public hearing. RMA will make its presentation, and the public will be invited to comment on the item. After the public's discussion, RMA will be asked to make its recommendation in this matter. Then the matter will be discussed by the Planning Commission and action taken by the Planning Commission. At the conclusion of the action, the Planning Commission and public hearing will be closed. each interested person that would like to speak, we'd like you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. The only exception would be at my discretion of the chair. You may not yield your time to others or reserve time to speak again. Because we might have a number of interested parties here, we request that you do not restate or repeat comments, testimony, or information, or duplicate any comments that have already been given. Please limit your remarks to the subject at hand. If you have a written statement or written comments, we ask that you submit the written statement or comments at this time instead of reading the comments into the record. We'll have time to review those comments, and if they're extensive, we'll make sure that there's adequate time. And I'd like to ask that no outbursts either way, clapping or cheering or anything like that. That's just going to delay the process even further. So at this time, I'd like to have the staff please make its comments.
Thank you, Chairman Elliott. This is Mike Washam, RMA Associate Director. And as you had stated in your comments there, that this is for the Animal Confinement Facilities Plan Update, consisting of General Plan Amendment GPA 10002, and the text amendment to the zoning ordinance PZC 17040. Give you a little bit of a brief summary of the components of this project. The General Plan Amendment is to the Animal Confinement Facilities Plan, consists of a policy document, and it's to update Chapter 12 of our General Plan. Includes the Dairy and Feedlot Climate Action Plan, a zoning text amendment that will amend the administrative use permitting and criteria for such, as well as amending the definitions in the zoning ordinance. And then fourth would be a criteria and standards for administrative approvals. The details of the proposed ACFP is basically what will this plan do? What will this update do? And it will create an ACFP list for existing facilities. Permitted herd sizes will be updated based on water board or air district numbers. We'll create a process for non-compliant facilities to become compliant. It'll streamline certain proposed expansions of existing facilities. There will be a conformance checklist or streamlining process for that. Non-qualifying expansions will require a special use permit and individual CEQA review. New bovine facilities will require a special use permit and individual CEQA review as well, and conditioned on water board and air district permitting regulations. For new facilities and expanding facilities, design and operational standards are set. We retain the original ACFP location and siting standards that we currently have, and we'll utilize annual compliance reports for this for the ACFP list. What the Dairy and Feedlot Climate Action Plan does, and what it is, it summarizes the regulatory setting addressing climate change, emissions, and provides an emissions inventory, a quantification basically from the bovine facilities, identifies and evaluates greenhouse gas reduction strategies through categories A and B, establishes procedures for utilizing the dairy cap with CEQA review, including streamlined review for certain expansions, establishes a voluntary greenhouse gas reduction measures and monitoring, and it proposes some additional county actions. The zoning ordinance text amendment and the associated resolution consists of the implementation of this ACFP by allowing administrative use permits for certain compliant bovine facilities, updating the relevant definitions in the zoning ordinance, revising compliance and reporting and monitoring, and then there's going to be a standalone resolution establishing criteria and standards for administrative use permits for certain compliant bovine facilities. The environmental review process that this plan has gone through, back in 2010, the SB 18 notification was sent out. An NOP, Notice of Preparation for the Environmental Impact Report with initial study, was released for review or for comments on November 30th of 2011. Scoping meeting was held in February of 2012. Notice of availability of the draft EIR was February of 2016 through March 21st of 2016. And the final EIR was released September of this year, 2017. And the recommended actions, the CEQA actions, are for final EIR certification, adoption of the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, the findings of CEQA facts of finding, or findings of fact, and statement of overriding considerations. I'll just point out one thing from the March 21st, 16, and why it took a little over a year to get to us. There was changes at the state level for the air. The air district was changing some requirements, so we need to make some revisions in our plan to stay consistent with the most current state laws and statutes. EIR correspondence that the county received. During the notice of preparation, there were 6 comment letters. Those are attached in Appendix C of the EIR. Draft EIR, we received 7 substantive comments. That's in Section 2 of the final EIR. And post-final EIR, we received 7 comment letters. Some are attached to this packet that you have, and some were sent to you, handed out this morning that we received late. And staff has reviewed the post-final EIR comment letters. We believe all environmental issues raised were adequately covered in the draft EIR or in the response to the draft EIR comments presented in the final EIR, or will be addressed in detailed responses to be presented to the Board of Supervisors. Also, some of the comment letters presented policy recommendations for changing the content of the ACFP and the dairy cap, which will be considered by the Board of Supervisors. Staff will be preparing detailed responses to all post-FEIR comments for the Board of Supervisors' consideration at its hearing. Staff believes there is nothing in the comment letters that would trigger draft EIR recirculation. For example, no new or substantially more severe significant impacts, and no new feasible mitigation measures or alternatives clearly lessening significant impacts. Staff's recommendation to your Planning Commission remains unchanged. And with that, that concludes staff's report. We would recommend that the Planning Commission open the public hearing, which you have done, receive public comments regarding the Animal Confinement Facilities Plan, Dairy and Feedlot Climate Action Plan, and proposed zoning ordinance text amendments and the criterias and standards resolution. We'll come back after we receive comments and we'll make our final recommendation to your Planning Commission at that time. I'd just like to say that introduce Hector Guerra. Staff is here for on the CEQA side of things, as well as Jason Garcia-Lebu is here as our main chief dairy planner. So implementation and process is here, CEQA is there, and we're here to get this process through. So with that, that would be concluding staff's report.
Are there any questions from the commission at this time of Mr. Washam or county staff? Okay, I guess we'll move on then, and we'll open this for comments. Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against this issue, or any comments from the audience? Okay, you can come over here to this microphone here, and please state your name and address for the record.
Okay. Do you need these for the record? Good morning. My name is J.P. Cadaviel. I'm here today representing Dairy Cares, which is a statewide organization of dairy groups representing the dairy industry here in California. I want to thank you and your staff for their hard work in developing this ACFP Dairy Climate Action Plan and final EIR. I'm here today representing the applicant. Tulare County dairy producers invested in this process and kind of co-sponsored it with the county to make sure that this work could get done so the EIR could get updated. We see this as an essential activity for maintaining the economic and environmental sustainability of the dairy industry in California, and we're certainly happy to see this nearing completion. It's been a long and difficult project. What we see today, the product in the final EIR, it's a very well-researched and well-put-together document in our view. It updates the county's dairy plan in a way that makes it consistent now with the many, many changes that have occurred in air district regulations, state law, and water regulations, water quality regulations in the state over the past decade. It now works better. The county's rules are much more coordinated with those regional regulations as a result of this work, and it eliminates unnecessary overlap and reduces the burden on the dairies for permitting and reporting and that sort of thing. So this basically lets the county do its job and lets the other agencies do their jobs, and it coordinates it much better. It's important to understand that all of those agencies that the county works with to regulate dairies have significantly strengthened their regulations over the past decade. Where we stand today, dairies face many more environmental regulations today than they did the last time the county updated its dairy ordinance. So I think you have a very strong and comprehensive environmental program here in Tulare County. There's many benefits in this plan. The staff outlined those, so I won't repeat that. I would be remiss, though, if I failed to mention kind of the economic importance of the dairy industry. I think you're all aware of that here in the state and in the county. There's a strong role to play for the dairy industry continuing into the future here in Tulare County. A study by UC Davis economist Daniel Sumner in looking at the most recent figures that were available 2014 for the state reported $65 billion in sales of dairy products or processed dairy products in the state, with 190,000 jobs being generated statewide. Conservatively, we believe at least 20,000 of those jobs are here in this county, and these are good jobs, with year-round jobs with benefits. Really, I think, help out and provide good benefits to the community. While the collective contribution of dairies is big in this county, I think it's important to also understand that many individual dairies have been economically challenged in recent years, and a lot of dairies have gone out of business. So taking actions like the one that you're contemplating today, I think, helps by making the permitting process, the regulatory process, clear and straightforward so that they can do what they need to do to update, modernize their facilities, and go about their business. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on this. We do urge your adoption of this today.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Craig Breon. I speak on behalf of the Kern Cahuilla chapter of the Sierra Club. We submitted you a letter that I think got into your packet, so I won't read it here. I'll simply go over the highlights of it and then ask if there's any questions. We basically make a number of small requests. Hopefully, you'll see them as small requests. The first one, I think, is a clarification. I'm not sure. It has to do with non-compliant dairies. So just imagine somebody who has a permit for 650 cows and actually has 850. We recommend that you suggest that the ordinance be clear in stating that that facility should come into the county for an expansion permit, that it wouldn't be the illegal cows, say, wouldn't be grandfathered, that they instead would come in and go through the same process as a new or expanded dairy would in terms of its permitting process. So just to say that non-compliant dairies, ones that are over their limit in terms of cattle, would come in and go through the expansion process, and if there's a new dairy out there that nobody knows about, that would have to come in and get a permit as a new dairy. The second issue is the 1.5% growth rate, which is the predicted growth rate in the environmental documents. It's unclear. They chose 2013 as the number to use, and that actually was the number that was the largest in terms of number of cattle. And but they're supposed to go through a year-long process where they go out to all the facilities, actually sort of count the cows, find out whether they're within or not within their permits, etc. All I'm recommending that you do is that once that final number, the more accurate number, comes back to you, that be the number that we gauge any growth off of, 1.5% per year or whatever. It would be an actual rather than an estimated number. And then finally, on that point, the environmentally superior alternative in the environmental impact report was one that recommended just a 1% growth rate rather than the 1.5% growth rate. So we would recommend that you recommend to the Board of Supervisors that environmentally superior alternative be chosen. It still fulfills almost all the project objectives. It still allows for growth of the industry, but at a slightly lower level to deal with slightly less impacts on air quality, water quality, surrounding neighborhoods, etc. The third item was one of public participation. There's actually a lot of leeway in here for dairy owners and staff to determine what mitigation measures, what standards, what new technologies, et cetera, will be going into these facilities. It's not that everybody has to do the same thing. There's still quite a lot of leeway. Therefore, we'd recommend that you ask for some sort of public participation process in the dairy permits as they go forward. And what we recommend here is that there be notice to the public when somebody comes in with a new or expanded dairy request, and that there be a hearing before county staff, and that hearing be then appealable to you. It just leaves the public with some input going forward as to which of the standards that are out there will be applied. Next one is just moving solar power from Category B to Category A. That would ensure that every facility that comes in for an expansion or new permit would at least consider solar power as one way to offset their energy use and their greenhouse gas emissions. And we believe that solar is at a point now where it's being used in the county with some dairies. I've seen it. It's cost effective. Most of the dairies have adequate land to include some sort of solar facility. And we believe it should be something that's considered as one of the initial requirements. It doesn't mean that every dairy would have to install it. It would mean that if they were not going to install solar, they would have to show why it's infeasible to do so. So it would just shift that from Category B to Category A, making sure that every dairy at least analyzes the ability for solar on their properties. And the last one has to do simply with county funding. There's a number of places in the environmental documents that it says, well, we'll be able to do this if we have adequate funding. We'll be able to do that if there's adequate funding. And I would suggest that you have a conversation with your staff people about the potential funding mechanisms to make sure that you can follow up on the new dairy permits and see that they're complying. All dairies have annual compliance reports. I don't know if that comes with a fee, but it should include a fee that would allow county staff to go out and do an inspection. CEQA mitigation and monitoring reporting programs can come with a fee, and the corrective action plans could come with a fee. That's when somebody's found out of compliance. That one in particular, when somebody's out of compliance, it seems reasonable that there be some sort of a fee on that to make sure that county staff has adequate time and resources to bring that facility back into compliance. So those are the recommendations that we made, and I'll take any questions if you have them. I hope you consider those and recommend them to the board. Thanks.
I have a question, though, for Jason and on our staff. Do we currently know how do we have a census of how many dairies we have and how many cows? Are we in process with that?
Good morning, Commissioners. Jason Garcia-Lebu, Chief Planner with the RMA. In terms of that, we have annual reports that we get every year from the facilities, and on those annual reports are the highest number of animals for the facility for the calendar year. And so we compile those annually and look at that. Through the process, we also follow up with facilities that we might not receive a report, so that tells us kind of a total number of dairy facilities.
And is there a percentage of non-compliant dairies, or how do we figure that?
During this process, we actually went through and we looked at using annual compliance report data, how many animals were on each facility, and then through the process, what they were permitted at, because it's broken into two different processes, which is before your commission today, grandfathered facilities as well as use permitted facilities. So staff went through and actually looked at each individual facility at what the permitted amount was and where they actually exist in reality, and through that determined kind of those numbers of whether or not they were compliant or not with county numbers.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jason. Pardon me? Well, we did see in the material, we did see approximately 1 million, and that, to me, the way I understood that, it was based on a previous census from another year. So maybe we can clarify that as we go along here. Anyone else?
Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Abernathy. I'm the General Manager of Milk Producers Council and also the Vice Chairman of Dairy Cares. This has been a 9-year process that I have to give a lot of kudos to staff and also the industry that came together in a very collaborative working relationship to try to figure out the best way possible to bring Tulare County into the same paradigm as other counties. I happen to be one individual that gets to work with producers from all over the state, specifically with the county planning and the Board of Soups, and then also with the regulatory agencies on assisting the gentlemen that are sitting in the office on making changes to their facilities. And quite frankly, there are some counties that are really, really easy to work with, and we are extremely excited about being at the cusp of this step-off point from the standpoint that Tulare County, being the largest dairy county in the state, needs to have that clarity for the families that are doing business. One point that JP had mentioned that I thought would be good to clarify, of the majority of milk that gets produced, the brick and mortar, CDI, Land of Lakes, they're all housed and located in Tulare County. So a good portion of that, the dollars that JP talked about, is really done and processed here, and even DFA has a very substantial amount of dairy farms in this area. But the simple fact of, as JP had mentioned, the regulatory process that has evolved since the passage of SB 700 between the job that the Air District does is very, very boilerplate, to say the least, along with what RB5 does through the bovine general order and now also the dairy general order. It also gives us clarity with Department of Environmental Health and Planning here at Tulare County. So there's a very, very clear process that if a producer decides to make a change on the facility, we're able to come through and work through this process and then use that as the foundation to move through the other processes moving forward. And that has been absent. I heard you make a comment. I believe there's about 1.8 million cows in the state of California, in the state. The industry, some of the growth projections that you're looking at, this industry has not made a profit except for 1 year since 2009. So the economic burdens on the industry, we're down about 4% in milk production. And that seems to be where we're kind of leveling out or finding our equilibrium moving forward. But California, as far as new facilities, we haven't built one in a long, it was, I think, 2004 through 2006 was the last new facilities built in this state. Now, do dairymen have a large indication that they would like to update these facilities that are 20, 30, 40 years old? Absolutely. And this process will be a key caveat to allowing this industry to continue to flourish. And with that, thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
Are we experiencing a net loss of dairies?
Yes, since 2009, we've lost over 600 family farms here in the state, and probably another 100 this year.
So is dairy demand nationally, is that trending down, that demand for dairy products?
That's demand for product. California has really reached kind of a unique scenario from the standpoint that protein is valuable. And a large percentage of the milk that is being processed into proteins, i.e. powders, is being delivered to the world market. So there's a tremendous value in it. We've been working and continue to supply that market because we have all the ports between San Francisco and San Pedro. So a tremendous amount of our product is being exported in the form of proteins. And between CDI and DFA and Land O'Lakes, they've really capitalized, and Hillmar Cheese for that matter, have really capitalized on that market.
For the folks that bought the Lactalis plant, they make dry milk, and 100% of their production goes to China, to babies, because their milk is not safe. That company?
That's a great point. The one thing I like to mention to folks a lot of times is, can you name me one time that we've ever had a recall of milk or a milk product? And the short answer is no. It's sampled before it's pulled from the tank, before it goes into the tanker. It gets sampled when it gets to the plant before it's unloaded. It gets sampled a third time before it gets processed into a product. So if any point during that time we experience anything that might be an abnormality, the milk goes down the drain. So the safeguards that California and the nation has put into place to provide a wholesome food product that is free of any abnormalities, we have never had an issue with that, especially here in California. So you bring up a great point.
Of the dairymen that are leaving the industry, what is the primary economic factor that drives them out, other than they don't get enough money for their product? What is the factor that makes them unprofitable?
So that's I'm gonna try to make this as simple as possible. One of the things, the dairy industry over the years, California had a paradigm that we had the lowest input cost, and we basically always were able to be very competitive back in the day when we had $6 input cost and had $10 milk. That really changed in 2009 when our input costs got up into the $15 to $18 per hundredweight range, and we were getting $14 for our milk. Most guys were losing. I think Mr. Maddox had made a comment in 2009 that the California dairy industry was bleeding $180 million a month in equity during the downturn in 2009. We didn't get a bailout. So the economic driver of input cost compared to the California state system of pay price is really the main driver that has continued to deteriorate. On top of that, we are the most regulated industry when it comes to dairy any place in the world. And the point that I believe you had made, Bill, was the fact that there are families that have left California that have actually went and purchased bare dirt, and within 9 months have built a 5,000 cow facility and are milking cows. It takes you 4 years to go through the CEQA process, and typically around $1 million to go through the permitting before you can actually put the shovel in the ground to move the first shovelful of dirt. So the environmental rules and regulations, which do protect public health, have become so burdensome that it's become, if I have the ability to spend $2 million to go through a process just to end up in court to be told I can't build it when I can go out of state and be milking within 12 months, why not go? And so we've really lost a lot of, it's interesting because for years I was the national sales manager for a dairy OEM. The same families that I dealt with in other states around the country are the same families that are here. They just moved. So it's very, very key, very, very important that Tulare County follows suit, like Kings County, your neighbor to the west, they've got a clear process. The dairy industry has continued to flourish in Kings County. Merced County is the same way. We're doing a few updates there. Stanislaus County is another county that's somewhat simple to move forward in, and having that clarity and that clear process through the regulatory scheme for these families will certainly be huge for everybody moving forward.
So the regulatory cost here is different than the other counties?
The regulatory costs
Is that what I
are
heard?
virtually the same across the board.
Okay.
The fact that you will now have a process to go through will give economic certainty on the cost of building or making the change or expansion. As an example, that one of the gentlemen that I work with, his facility is 50 years old. The fact that the stanchions and the concrete and everything need to be replaced, now having a process to come in and go through and actually do a modification, we call it a routine retrofit and replacement, will make that a very simple process. Your document will be the overarching CEQA document that then we will then take to the Air District, go through their best available control technology and mitigation measures as part of Rule 4570. From there, we'll submit back over to RB5 and go through with Clay the protocols that they need to have in place to have public health certainty in place. And when you're done, you go start building. So, but there's a team of folks that we work with, and it's ironic, they're all located in Tulare County too, that are really, really good at moving these processes forward. And they too are very excited about having the clarity and the ability to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Charles Aroso. Most people call me Joey. Our family's been dairying in Tulare County since 1912. I'm a fourth-generation dairy farmer, and I represent an industry that I think has been really important in Tulare County. It's the #1 agricultural industry in our county, and it's a industry that is really looked upon around the world as kind of a leader in how we do things. And our family was a perfectly good example of how process can just totally annihilate you. And we've dairied here for 100 and some years. We bought a piece of dirt in 1980 for future plans to build a dairy, and basically got sued over the CEQA process and got drug out in court for 5 years with, spending $1 million out of our own pocket. And so it's just disappointing that we didn't have the process streamlined sooner. But I've been a member of the commission that worked on this process, and it's been a long process. And I guess the only good thing I can say is I think we've been really thorough, the county and the people that worked on it, to try to make our farms the most environmentally safe farms on the planet. And I brought with me today one of my employees, Robert Ayala. He's worked for us for almost 40 years, and I think sometimes people don't realize that the impact that the dairy industry has when you're employing people 365 days a year. Cows require that kind of care, and you got to have good people to take care of them. I always say you can't be successful out there if you don't have good people taking care of your cows and your farm. And the thing that I'm proud of is Roberto's family came here. They helped us take care of our farm, our animals. But I'm proud of their family and the things that they've done for our community and our state. His son is a sheriff down in Kern County. His other son works for one of the milk processing plants. He has other relatives that worked for us that are now accountants at the Fairfield School District up close to Sacramento. And so I just think that was all supported by milk. And I think sometimes we lose track of the importance of having jobs that are there every day of the year, and how important that is to have people being able to get a check once a week and support their family and provide education for their family. And that's one of the things that I'm extremely proud that our industry has done a great job of. So thank you. Questions?
Thank you so much.
Mi nombre es Roberto Ayala. Tengo 40 años trabajando en el mismo rancho.
My name is Roberto Ayala. Good morning. I've been working for the same ranch for 40 years.
O sea que doy gracias a Dios que haya ranchos de esos porque ahí salió mi familia adelante. Todos mis sobrinos son los profesionales.
And I'm thankful for farms as such because of that, my family has been successful. I have nephews that have become professionals.
O sea que yo estoy contento porque si hay eso y le doy gracias a Dios que haya de esos porque hay muchas familias que de allí sale buena familia y tengo 40 años viviendo en el mismo rancho allá.
I'm thankful for their existence, and because of them, there's families such as ours that come out of it, and I'm very grateful.
Es todo, gracias.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
Thank you.
Except for your name.
Good morning. My name is Gerben Leyendecker. I own 2 dairies in Tulare County, as my family owned 10 dairies, and so our family is very large in the dairy industry. And we are basically, I also serve on the board of directors of California Dairies here in Visalia. I just want to say I'm very thankful for what the county has done, staff has done to get this process done so that as an industry we can keep moving as a dairy industry forward. So I just want to applaud them for the work they've done and support it. Thank you.
Frank.
He's not with us right now, but if you wanted him here, I'll send him.
No, that's okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Frank Mendonca. I'm president of Western United Dairymen, the largest trade organization in California. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission and the staff for all the hard work you've done to get us to this point. The members of Western United Dairymen represent hundreds of dairies, thousands of jobs, and so this process has been very important to us to be able to modernize these older dairies, these older facilities. I have 4 children. They all have the passion to be in the dairy business. They want to follow in the family tradition. And how do you do that with old facilities? So again, I'm thankful for you guys to get us to this position. And I, along with Western United Dairymen, would support the adoption of this plan. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Well, seeing none, I think we can move on then and close the public hearing.
Was RMA going to come back and...
Yeah, but I think now we'll take any discussion among the planning commissioners. Any questions on what they're asking us? But
I'd like to hear RMA discuss the items that were brought up on potentially changing them.
Thank you. Specifically on Mr. Breon's comments of clarification of the letter that was submitted that's in the packet, and At this time, I would still say the same thing, that the EIR addresses it appropriately. Those numbers, those growth rates, all of that is still considered in the document.
We've had a net loss. How can you ever have a gain?
Obviously the market decides that. So, but as far as we went through extensive research to develop what the herd size is based on this, and the growth rate. Facts might be that, as you said, we've lost a number of dairies. We may continue to lose dairies. This is something that will help existing dairies get into conformance and be able to put the most highest and best technology to use and be able to expand and reestablish and improve their existing facilities. As far as we did mention about solar, just as a side fact, that there's over 50 dairies in the county that have solar on their facilities. So that's a very large percentage of the dairies already do have. They average about 1 megawatt in size each one, but this is over the last 2 years. The county's issued permits for approximately 50 permits for solar. So a number of the dairies do have solar already.
Also, we have a dairy, I think, in Tipton. 100% of all their manure, I think, for the most part, goes to ethanol plant. And
yes, there's the dairy there. There's a number of projects that are in the works that are under construction as far as capturing the methane and putting it into either compressed, cleaning it, scrubbing it, and using it for their own vehicle fleet on the dairy. There's a project like that. There's other projects where they're going to scrub it and put it into the Southern California gas pipeline as well. So there's a great number of projects that are underway as far as those goes too.
If dairies haven't made a profit since 2009, how can they be sustainable to continue? What do they have to do?
make it up in the volume.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Do they need to get bigger, or do they need to consolidate and be smaller and more streamlined as operations?
I can't speak to their business plans. Individual businessmen have their own business models, and they go the best way that fits their business.
Seems like the one gentleman that spoke talked about that this will enable him to modernize his dairy. Is that what we're doing here? It enables people to come in, get permits, and modernize, so it'd be more efficient.
It's precisely a way of streamlining. The Air District and the Water Board have their requirements. Nothing that we do is proposing to avoid any of that. They've got to comply with all of those regulations. This just allows a streamlined way of being able to make those improvements to their existing facilities.
So to my earlier question about what were the factors in driving dairymen out, the comment was input costs. Does this hold the line on input costs with these regulations?
Well, that's one thing. That's one example of doing business in the state of California and elsewhere is the cost for doing that. But as far as input costs, county doesn't have control over what the cost of feed or any of that or what the price is that they get.
But it won't make it more
difficult.
What we're proposing here won't make it more difficult on the more costly to add to the input costs to their bottom line.
Nothing that we are doing is going to add. We're trying to streamline the process so they can get things done efficiently.
All right.
It seems like that our basic issue here is like on all our special use permits. We discover someone that's non-compliant and then we bring them into compliance. How do we do that with dairies? Are we out there actively looking?
Well, with the dairies, as Jason had mentioned, and I can defer to him on some of the specifics, but there's grandfathered dairies that have existed before our zoning ordinance and regulations have been in. So they have a number of cows and a herd size. They also have to, and they've continued to have to maintain permitting with the Air District and the Water Board. So what we're looking at, those ways to get their numbers, if they're permitted good with the Air Board and the Water Board, for them to have an easy way to get in compliance with numbers we have in. So this is a process of trying to get those in a streamlined manner without opening it all up to everything when these are existing permitted with the air district, permitted with water. So it's a process to streamline.
Is there a fine for noncompliance, or? 'Cause
I
that's one of
don't
the
know what
items.
well, I'll defer to Jason.
As far as non-compliance and existing fees and fines on that, so with annual compliance reports, we currently collect a fee on that for each facility when they submit the report in, and that's depending on their numbers. In addition to that, we actually have a code violation process, so if there's an active violation, there's fees to help recover that cost as well. And so, and then we also have additional fees through compliance monitoring, or if there's existing mitigation that's been done. That's your commission might remember some of the use permits that we approved a few years ago, in which those were collected as part of the process to help mitigate that. So we do have 3 different types of fees and that we collect for those different responsibilities.
So Jason, when someone comes in and wants to modernize their dairy, is this done through site plan review initially? Site plan review?
Under the current system, it's set up to go through the use permit process. Smaller processes do or can have an administrative process. For instance, if they have existing shades out there and they want to replace the shades or something of that nature, that would be through an administrative process. But for new expansions and other items that we've discussed today, that's what this project is to help address, is some of those types of facilities.
And the initial process is through a site plan review?
Well, it's all through, a few years ago, I think in 2011, we switched our process so that site plan review is actually through your planning commission now. And so we do the project review committee process and then bring those projects to the planning commission.
I'm saying the public wanted to have some access to this, and that is not a closed meeting.
Well,
initial review.
In terms of administrative use permit processing, which is a key component of this project, through that processing, that is still affected neighbors are still notified of those decisions. And so that still would be an appealable decision. So.
It seems, Jason, maybe one more question. It seems that, subsidies are at the crux of this sustainability for this entire industry. And we're, on a lot of the environmental related issues, we're asking, that there be voluntary compliance, and I know Mr. Washam mentioned there were several that are already going to solar to help, lessen the footprint, so to speak. Are there subsidies available to provide incentives to dairies to become more, let's say more efficient and less polluting?
Well, I have to think the trade organizations, the gentleman that was up earlier, they have best practices of what other dairies that are successful do. So I'm assuming that gets passed on across the industry, within California anyway. I heard some counties are, other than Tulare County, were doing well. And I guess I was wondering, what were they doing that Tulare County wasn't doing to be more successful? So that's a question, I guess, it's sort of an open question here. Are there best practices that other people should know about? I have to think they do, but it may be cost prohibitive. I don't know.
Well, there are kind of a couple different questions there. One, to address Mr. Elliott's question. In regards to that, I do know that there are some programs, grant programs and other things available for some of the projects that Mr. Washam was talking about regarding the digester type or solar type projects and things of that nature. To go to Mr. Millie's question, in terms of that really depends. It depends on the jurisdiction. So each jurisdiction has different planning and zoning rules, and so because of that, effectively there are different processes. And our process is set up through the Planning Commission process as it is right now. And through that, CEQA is addressed. And typically with dairy projects, every recent dairy project has gone through the EIR process. And so that's what makes it a little more difficult in those circumstances. So we know that there's going to be impacts, but hopefully through this streamlined process, we can incorporate those into these administratively, and that's where we're looking to streamline things. So hopefully that answers your question.
What dairy did we tour? That was my model for
Yeah.
what a dairy should be from an efficiency.
Well, that was the largest
What
dairy.
was that?
in
What was the
Tulare
name of that?
County.
Was it used to be the Sisters?
Yeah.
Velardis.
Velardis, yeah, Velardis.
Yeah, that's a large dairy.
Yeah.
That's
Gee, it's the
largest.
biggest one.
So there's small, medium, and large. So there's cost factors here that the smaller person can't handle, that because of economy of scale. But I'm just wondering, is regulation drowning some of these people into going out of business? That's what my earlier question was, as far as input costs. I'm still not sure I understand that.
Well, excuse me, I think Mr. Orosa, that was one of his comments, one of his facts,
Right.
is that the process bogged them down so far that it couldn't carry on. And it might not be that it's a good project. Maybe it's not going to finish out. Maybe it's not a good project. But at least we will have in place with this program a process that we can get there and find out if it's a good program or not. It's right now they bogged down so bad with it that no one knows. So, like you said, I think there's a lot of especially the small dairies that are trying to be compliant. This is going to be a very good tool for them to become compliant and get in line with what we want in Tulare County for our dairies.
Okay.
Well, I think an important point too, and we did as a statewide planning commissioners organization, we toured the Velardis Dairy, and that owner said that within 10 years, and I mean this is speaking from someone that owns the largest dairy in Tulare County, that the industry will be non-existent in California. That's what he said to us as planning commissioners. Now, I think that was a little bit stretched in terms of the time frame, but he says that for a number of factors, and it's not just the bottom line or the economy of it, but the influence of global warming and climate change, that the dairies as we know them now will not be in the state of California. That's what he said.
As a citizen of Tulare County, I hope he's very wrong.
Well, he's looking at the books every day. But anyway, and that's my question, how can dairies continue to operate if they're not making a profit? And I think that as planning commissioners, we're charged with the land use and making sure that the environmental impacts are lessened in some ways. And I see this plan as really a good start in that direction, but I see most of the things as voluntary and not requirements. And here we are talking about we don't want to add more requirements and more regulations because it just inhibits the bottom line even further. So we're really at a difficult place here. Let's say in 20 years or 25 years, dairies do pass out of existence because we invent some other kind of agriculture to take its place. Will that be viable in a county that supported 300 some odd dairies for all these years? Are we taking the steps to safeguard the land? That's my biggest question.
Well, if I may, through the chair, what we're looking at is what's under the control and under the purview of your commission, which is land use. And as far as the other pieces go, we're not there. We're not judging that. But as far as the stewards of the land, the water board is the one that has the expertise and the requirements. Every dairy is required to meet all those requirements. The air district all of the requirements for their district. All of this needs to be permitted and up to speed with that. So we're not sidestepping, we're not doing anything like that. Everything has to be compliance with those regulatory agencies. So what we're doing is looking at a streamlined process for the land use entitlements to allow these dairies to modernize in an efficient way. When developers come in to do something, time and certainty are the two critical steps for someone to make a business decision. They need to know what the requirements are and how long it'll take to go through this process. When in the past these things have gone into a quagmire where they're just extended into full EIRs and they just bog down, as was just described, that it takes 4 years to get something done. This will streamline that without skipping any requirements, but it will streamline that process.
So right now, Mr. Washman, right now, if we can say this, so Tulare County has requirements to get a permit, and a lot of times those are the same requirements as the water board and the air quality. But we all require them, so you have to skip the hoops through every agency, right?
Well, we require, as the county, we will require them to be in compliance. As when you see our conditions of approval through your planning commission's resolutions on use permits, it will state that it has to be obtain the permitting and the requirements through those different regulatory agencies. So we're not trying to put other hurdles up that they're already having to, or potentially do something that's inconsistent with the water board. So we're deferring to their expertise and their regulatory powers. So we're requiring that they comply with all that, but we're not adding additional as far as the water and the.
Well, 10 years ago, we used to look at dairy EIRs. Do we have any new dairies that are applying right now to be in new dairy?
I will defer again to Jason, because Jason's our permit center chief planner, so and all things dairy. So as far as what permits are in line and what.
Be interested to know.
We currently have a number of applications that are being processed, but the outcome of that process depends on the implementation of this plan. So the outcome of that will affect how we treat that. And so, but we do have a number of applications to address the various issues depending on specific, it's facility specific.
So what, half a dozen or?
We have about 80 applications right now.
To establish new dairies or expansions?
No, it is not for new facilities. This is to address existing facilities.
That makes sense. Thank you. Well, if there's is there any other discussion from the Planning Commission? If there's none, then maybe we could have Mr. Washam summarize here.
Well, the recommendation before your Planning Commission is to close the public hearing, the public testimony, and approve by separate motion the following Planning Commission recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. Number one would be recommend the certification of the final EIR and adopt the California Environmental Quality Act findings of fact, statement of overriding considerations, and the mitigation monitoring reporting program for the Animal Confinement Facilities Plan. Recommend by resolution that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proposed Animal Confinement Facilities Plan, GPA 10002, the Dairy and Feedlot Climate Action Plan, and the proposed zoning text amendments, PZC 17-040, and adopt and recommend the adoption of criteria and standards for administrative action for certain compliant bovine facilities. Those would be 3 separate actions. Each one would be its own.
Okay, we have 3 separate motions before us. And please, if you're going to make a motion, let's spell out exactly what you're making a motion for.
Well, I can read it.
I know, we should read at least some of it so we understand the differences between the 3.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion that we recommend by resolution that the Board of Supervisors certify the final Environmental Impact Report, EIR, prepared for the proposed Animal Confinement Facilities Plan, ACFP, and Dairy and Feedlot Climate Action Plan, Dairy CAP, SCH number 201111078, and that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proposed California Environmental Quality Act CEQA findings of fact, statement of overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring and reporting program MMRP for the ACFP and Dairy CAP.
I second that motion.
Roll call, please.
Gong,
Yes.
Millies,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Whitlatch,
Yes.
Tigliano,
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Okay, we're looking for the second one.
Like to
Go ahead.
like to make a motion that we recommend by resolution that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proposed ACFP GPA 10-002 and the Dairy CAP and amend the zoning ordinance to implement the proposed ACFP PZC 17-040.
There a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call, please.
Gong,
Yes.
Millies,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Whitlatch,
Yes.
Tigliano,
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Okay, I make a motion that we adopt and recommend by resolution that the Board of Supervisors adopt criteria and standards for administrative action for certain compliant bovine facilities.
I'll second that motion.
Gong,
Yes.
Millies,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Whitlatch,
Yes.
Tigliano,
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Okay, the motions are passed. We do have a process now, and I think as a leader in the industry, you know, we have to be the ones to set this process in motion. And I really, to me, I have some reservations about a lot of the ways we can do it. So we need to, you know, enforce this process and bring the dairies that we do have into compliance. And I appreciate Nancy's point in terms of we have a place to start. And I think this needs to be a dynamic document and that we move forward and allow it to grow and change, because there are going to be factors beyond our control that are going to make those changes necessary. And I thank you all for your comments and participating today, and invite any of you to, you know, comment to our planners or to our staff at any time about how the process is working or is not working. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to item 5, which is the director's report.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do you want all this stack of paper back? Are you going to have to give it to board members, or are you going to copy it again?
They're going to have separate packets.
Okay.
Just put it in the recycle.
Most of it's a draft anyway.
Yeah.
There'll be another paper.
Name of paper.
Thank you. Just coming up on your calendar, next Planning Commission meeting, we have the Hamlet plans, 11 Hamlet plans and 5 community plans. And a self-help subdivision in Erosi. So that will be the next one. And then we have you've planned the November 15th special, well, it's not a special meeting, but we added that meeting to the calendar. At that meeting, we'll consider Culver Mine, which is a mining operation.
Folks, please, can you make your comments outside?
So that's October 15th, we'll have a special meeting?
November 15th.
November.
Not special,
Excuse me,
it's
November
added.
15th.
It's just an added meeting. It's not a special meeting. It's just been added to the calendar.
We have one on the 8th, and then one a week later.
Correct. And on the 15th, we'll be hearing, you'll be considering a the Culver Mine out near Porterville, as well as a RV campground near the Tule River outside of Porterville as well. So those are the two major projects on that item. There may as well be some maps or some other things, but those are the two main items. And then again, the next meeting on the 8th will be a very large stack of documents for the community plan updates, the 5 of those communities and the 11 hamlets. So a lot of work, a lot of great efforts gone into that, and as well as having a final report. Again, the disadvantaged communities grant that we received is what was able to fund those legacy hamlet and community plan updates. And so there's an overall program report that kind of identifies all of that. So that will be there as well on the 8th.
Well, I went through the first one of the animal confinement. There was a lot of bloodletting, and so for you that weren't here, it was a very long process. Lots of all-day meetings. So.
And I want to commend the RMA for that, because I was sitting here thinking the same thing. It was very clear and laid out, and there weren't a lot of questions in the product, and that was, I think, the reason why this all went so smooth. So I commend you all. It was, I know, a lot of hard work.
I think the telling statement is what Jason said about no new dairies applying. And we do need to modernize the existing. So I think there was some really good progress made in that. One of the things that, we're going down this road of digesters, and then we read in here that there's a downside to digesting, of course. But I think that the technology is changing so fast that something will come forward, and that we ought to be open to using that. And I think that that's the key here, is the acceleration of climate change, which, after the last several months of disasters, I think we're in for some changes in that realm too. Even 10 years ago, or even back in 2013, we were still debating whether there was climate change or not. And now we have at least the process to approach what we need to do. And I think the solar and the digesters and some of these environmental trade-offs are at least going to allow us to modernize what we have and operate more efficiently and better. So the county has to be a leader in that, and I think staff's done a good job in taking us in that direction.
I think you all deserve a pay raise. They didn't pay attention, did they?
No, they
They're
don't.
not
They're
listening.
making too much anyway.
He's giving you all a pay raise.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
So is there any other,
No other report.
no other, any of the other staff want to speak that are here? You've said
Good to
enough.
see the good county council back. I like Clint, but
I watch him at the gym work out.
Yeah. We saw you out there, so we appreciate you being here. Okay, at this time, if there are any other discussion items, and we'll adjourn till November 8th, 2017.
I will be a year older.